"Just don't embarrass me," my sister hissed into the phone, her voice so icy it sent shivers down my spine. "Mark's father is a federal judge on the Court of Appeals. Do you even realize how high up the ladder that is?" I remained silent. What could I say? That I knew Judge Thomas Reynolds personally? That we were on informal terms and had been colleagues for 10 years? That would have been an outburst I didn't have the courage to endure. At dinner, in that immaculate, operating room cold dining room of their new mansion, she introduced me as her sister Elena, our family headache. The word disappointment hung in the air, unspoken, but all the more poignant. Mark, her new fiancé, smiled sheepishly. And then he appeared in the doorway. Judge Reynolds Sr. He entered not as a guest, but as the master of the world, calm, confident, with a slight weariness in his gaze. Victoria stood frozen in a radiant pose, ready to introduce her chosen one, and finally herself, a worthy part of this dynasty. Judge Reynolds glanced around the table, and his eyes settled on me. And suddenly his face lit up with a genuine, warm smile. He walked around the table and extended his hand, not to Mark, not to Victoria, but to me. "Your Honor," he said firmly, with genuine respect, "I'm glad to see you again. I didn't know you were here." Mark was being modest. He didn't tell me his fiancée is the sister of the fairest judge in our county. A silence fell over the room, so thick you could swim in it. And then I heard a sharp, crystal ringing. My sister's glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the immaculate parquet floor, shattering into 1,000 diamond shards. Wine, dark as blood, spread across the light wood. But let me go back. Because the expression on my sister Victoria's face, that mixture of absolute shock, disbelief, and rage slowly rising from the abyss, wasn't formed in a second. It had been building, honing, crystallizing for 15 long years. My name is Elena Martinez. I'm 42. Victoria is 45. Growing up, she was the golden child of our family. Not just an excellent student, a shining ideal. Captain of the debate team, the face of the school yearbook, a full scholarship to Georgetown. And I was a shadow. A quiet, unnoticeable girl, more at home in the dusty realm of library stacks than at the noisy family table where Victoria shone. Our parents owned a successful accounting firm in Northern Virginia. We were upper middle class, comfortable, country club membership, the right zip code. Victoria played by these rules impeccably. She married her college boyfriend, Bradley, a corporate lawyer. Their life was like a glossy catalog, a McMansion in the suburbs, a huge SUV, a carefully curated Instagram feed where happiness was measured in buffet tables and ocean sunsets. And I got into law school. Not Georgetown, where, as she said, they wouldn't have gotten me anyway. I chose a state university, took out loans, worked nights as a paralegal in an office that smelled of stale coffee and despair. Victoria told everyone I wouldn't be able to go to a real school, that I was doing something unintelligible. Her leniency was a whetstone that honed my resolve over the years. After graduation, I got a job as a law clerk for a federal judge. "Clerk," Victoria snorted when she heard the news. "Elena, my dear, that's basically a secretary, and here I thought you wanted to be a real lawyer." I didn't correct her. I learned early on Victoria needed to win, needed to feel superior. Any amendment was a declaration of war for her. What she didn't know, what our entire family didn't know, was that my judge was Frank Davidson, the same Frank Davidson who would become Attorney General of the United States 5 years later. He became my mentor, my strictest teacher, and my most loyal ally. After clerking, I transferred to the federal prosecutor's office, the Violent Crimes Unit, then Organized Crime and Corruption. Interrogations, evidence, and juries became my world. I won cases, complex, high-profile, almost hopeless ones. When Victoria learned about it, she'd tell her friends, "Well, Elena's got a pretty good job for a civil servant. Stable." At 29, I was nominated for a federal judgeship, the youngest in our district. 18 months of hellish vetting followed. The FBI dug into my past, Senate committees questioned me, and I told my family I was still working as a prosecutor. Victoria, meanwhile, was planning her second wedding. She had divorced Bradley for his lack of ambition and was marrying Richard, a pharmaceutical executive. At the engagement party, amid the clinking of glasses, she loudly declared for all to hear, "Well, at least one of the Martinez sisters married well." My Senate confirmation was quiet, almost casual. I didn't invite my family to the small, private swearing-in ceremony. That same evening, Judge Davidson, now Attorney General, called me. "Elena," he said, his voice filled with incredible pride, "you've earned it. Don't let anyone, do you hear me? Anyone make you think otherwise." I served for 13 years. For 13 years, I wasn't Elena, Victoria's sister, but Judge Martinez. I handled cases that made headlines, wrote opinions cited by appellate courts, and earned a reputation for toughness, yet impartiality. My family still considered me a mid-level civil servant, earning a paltry $75,000. Victoria thought I lived in a sad apartment because I kept my life under wraps. She didn't know about my townhouse in Alexandria, which I bought with cash. She didn't know that federal judges make over $200,000 a year. She thought I drove an old Camry and had no idea about the vintage Mercedes SL in my garage. She sincerely believed I was alone, because no successful man wants a boring, hardworking bureaucrat. She didn't know about Michael, a judge from a neighboring county with whom we had been dating for 4 years, keeping our relationship a secret for ethical reasons. Her third marriage was falling apart when she met Mark Reynolds. Handsome, charming, ambitious, and, oh joy, the son of Judge Thomas Reynolds. After learning this on our second date, she called me, her voice shaking not with excitement, but with cold, strategic determination. "Elena, I need you to understand something," she said. "This is the most important relationship in my life. His family, they're from a different circle. Federal judges, senators, you'll meet them. And when that happens, for heaven's sake, don't embarrass me. Don't talk about your job. If they ask, say you're in law. That's technically true. And finally, buy a decent dress, none of your sale jackets." The next 6 months were a Broadway production. Victoria transformed herself into a project called The Perfect Bride for the Reynolds. Her Instagram became a chronicle of exquisite dinners and charity galas. She'd call me with reports. "Mark's mom mentioned Nantucket. I'm researching Nantucket. Did you know it's different from the Hamptons?" "Of course not." "Mark's father knows Senator Williams personally." Victoria's voice on the phone rang like a crystal bell. "They went to Yale together. Can you imagine? My future father-in-law is on first-name terms with senators." She paused, letting me get a sense of the scale. "And I met Mark's sister, Catherine. She's a partner at a venture capital firm. Partner, Elena. Manages a $400 million fund." I listened, holding the phone to my ear, looking out my office window at the gloomy courthouse. "Congratulations," I said in a flat, tired voice. "I'm so happy for you." And then I hung up, returning to the pile of court documents, to the real world, where power was measured not by Instagram connections, but by the weight of evidence and the force of law. In March, I handled a case that shook the entire state. A senator, bribery, developers, dirt spilled into the open. The trial lasted 3 weeks, each one a living hell. My decisions on the admission of evidence and on motions were cited in the Washington Post and the New York Times. My name was featured in law reviews. Victoria never mentioned it. She didn't read legal news. Her feed was filled with visions of her future life, photos of estates on Martha's Vineyard, notes on etiquette, samples of wedding invitations made of thick, embossed paper. In April, I received an invitation to speak at a symposium at Harvard Law School. The topic was federal justice reform. Judge Reynolds was the keynote speaker. The previous day, we had dined with a small group of judges at a quiet restaurant in Cambridge. The conversation was lively and professional. When the others briefly broke up, Judge Reynolds pushed aside his coffee cup and quietly asked, "Elena, I've been meaning to ask, are you related to Victoria Martinez from Arlington? My son Mark is engaged to Victoria Martinez." The air around us seemed to thicken. "That's my sister," I said simply, without hesitation. His eyebrows shot up. "Your sister? Mark never mentioned it. Does she know you're a judge?" I sighed, looking at the dark surface of my coffee. It's complicated. I'm very protective of my privacy, especially this aspect of it. He looked at me intently, and in his eyes, usually so penetrating and sharp, I saw not a judge, but a person. "The family doesn't know," he stated softly. "No, sir. It must be hard to bear it alone." I shrugged, trying to make the gesture seem nonchalant. "It's easier this way. Believe me. My sister, she needs certain things to be true about me, for me to remain who she thinks I am. Letting her think I'm a modest, unambitious loser, that makes her happy. She gets her story, I get peace, everyone wins." Judge Reynolds frowned. The lines around his eyes deepened. "This isn't winning, Elena. This is hiding. Living in the shadow of your own achievements." "With respect, Your Honor," my voice wavered, betraying the tension, "it's survival, a way to maintain some kind of peace. Fragile, insincere, but peace." He didn't press the issue. He simply nodded slowly and sipped his coffee. But in his gaze, I read something more than polite condescension. Concern, and perhaps understanding, a deep, sad understanding of the cages we sometimes build from family ties. In May, Victoria officially announced her engagement. Mark staged a proposal with the grandeur of a Hollywood film, a private room at Four Seasons, a string quartet, a sea of white roses. She called me the next morning, her voice intoxicatingly happy. "It's official. I'm going to be part of the Reynolds family. Mark's already talking about me joining the board of his mother's charitable foundation. Can you imagine? I'll be at the same table with the wives of federal judges and senators." Her triumph was deafening. "We're having an engagement dinner next month. Small, intimate, just the immediate family. And that means," she paused dramatically, "I need you to come." "Of course, Victoria," I said. "But Elena," her tone abruptly changed from triumphant to warning, "I need you to understand, this isn't our family barbecue get-together. These are sophisticated people. Mark's father was a Supreme Court clerk. His mother went to Oxford. They just wouldn't understand your lifestyle." "My lifestyle?" I couldn't help but ask. "Well, you know what I mean. Civil service, lack of career advancement. Just, please, don't talk about work. Don't mention money or where you live. Don't embarrass me. Please." I could tell her anything. At that very moment. To destroy her fragile house of cards with a single sentence. But the fatigue accumulated over the years was heavier than the truth. "I will behave appropriately," I promised in a low voice. Lunch was scheduled for June 15th at Ivy's, that exclusive restaurant in Georgetown where you can't get in without connections. Victoria sent me the dress code. Cocktail, good cocktail attire, Elena, not from a sale. I wore a dark blue silk dress, understated, impeccably cut, bought not at a sale, but from a boutique where they knew me by sight. The pearl earrings were a gift from Michael. I arrived in an old Camry, which I kept in the garage for such occasions, knowing Victoria would definitely glance at the parking lot. She was already there, resplendent in a dazzling white dress that probably cost a federal prosecutor a month's salary. Seeing me, she darted forward, squeezing my hand so hard the bones snapped. "You're here, good. Look, Mark's family hasn't arrived yet. When they are, let me do the talking. Don't share anything about yourself. If they ask what you do, just say law and change the subject. Understood?" "Understood." "And please," her whisper grew shrill, "don't mention your apartment or your car. Mark's sister drives a Tesla. His mother drives a new Mercedes. They don't need to know you're barely making ends meet." I shuddered. I almost snorted. I almost told her that my sad little apartment was a 3-story townhouse in a historic neighborhood that Catherine Reynolds had once praised at a legal appointment. That my Mercedes was a collector's SL, maintained by the best mechanic in the state. Instead, I simply nodded. "I'll be discreet." "Thank you," she exhaled, as if I'd just agreed to surgery. "This is important to me, Elena. This family, they are everything I ever wanted. Everything I ever dreamed of." My parents approached, Dad in his best country club jacket, Mom in pearls and a concerned smile. They hugged Victoria, showering her with admiration, and nodded to me with their usual, slightly distant nod. "Well, Elena," Mom said, lowering her voice, "Victoria told us about Mark's family. Very influential people. Please don't talk too much about your work, okay? We don't want them to think we're ordinary." "I understand, Mom," I said, a bitter lump in my throat. And then they entered. Judge Thomas Reynolds, tall, gray-haired, with that unhurried, confident grace that fills any space. His wife, Caroline, elegant in a beige Chanel suit with intelligent, assessing eyes. Catherine, in a perfectly tailored pantsuit with the cool, analytical smile of someone accustomed to assessing risks and assets. And Mark, beaming, placed his hand on Victoria's back. They introduced themselves. Handshakes. "Mom, Dad, Catherine, this is Victoria's family, her parents David and Marie, and her sister Elena." Victoria immediately interjected, her voice unnaturally high-pitched. "My younger sister. She works in law, in government agencies." She said it as if she were talking about working for the sewer department. Judge Reynolds extended his hand to my father. "David, nice to meet you. Thomas Reynolds." Then he turned to me. His gaze met mine. A storm flashed in his eyes. Recognition, instant understanding of the situation, a question on the verge of bursting from his lips. I shook my head almost imperceptibly, barely moving my head. Not here, not now. He froze for a split second. Then his face became a polite, impenetrable mask again. He took my hand. "Elena, nice to meet you." "Your Honor," I said quietly, feeling Victoria's hand dig into my elbow. "My honor," he replied, a subtle but audible irony lacing his voice. "Just Mr. Reynolds, Elena," Victoria hissed sharply. "Don't be weird." We sat at the large round table. Victoria settled herself, as if on a throne, between Mark and Judge Reynolds. I was relegated to the far end, seated between Catherine, who was watching me with quiet, unwavering interest, and my father. Dinner began with light conversation, wedding venues, dates, guest lists. Victoria dominated the conversation, her laughter too loud, her gestures too expansive. She kept touching Mark's arm as if asserting her ownership. "We're thinking about September," she announced, "at the Ritz-Carlton in Tysons. 500 guests. Black tie, of course." "Sounds wonderful," Caroline Reynolds said politely, adjusting her napkin. "Mark's father will certainly invite so many important people," Victoria continued, addressing Judge Reynolds directly. "Isn't that so? You must know absolutely everyone in Washington legal circles." "I know some people," Judge Reynolds replied cautiously, his gaze sliding toward me. "Some," Victoria snorted, as if he'd said something comically modest. "Mark says you have senators on speed dial, that you've argued before the Supreme Court. That's incredible. I've always admired people in positions of real power." Real power. She said this pointedly, casting a quick, piercing glance at me. Judge Reynolds' expression remained impassive, but I noticed the muscles in his jaw tense slightly. "Power is a relative concept," he said measuredly. "The most powerful people I know often work quietly, without fanfare, without public recognition." Victoria ignored the subtext entirely. "Oh, of course, but still, there's something about achievement, about making someone of yourself." Another glance, like a bat, was thrown in my direction. Not everyone has that drive, of course. My mother shifted in her chair and nodded, as if agreeing with an undeniable truth. Elena was always content with less, modest demands. "Less?" Catherine asked, her sharp gaze shifting from me to my mother, then back again. "And what exactly do you do, Elena?" Victoria intervened like a shield before I could open my mouth. "She works for the government, in the local courts, something like that. Nothing particularly interesting. She's doing just fine. She's never been ambitious, unlike some." She smiled smugly. "Local courts," Catherine repeated slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. Her gaze betrayed more than mere interest, but an analytical calculation, as if she were trying to piece together the inconsistencies. "But it provides a livelihood. Must be interesting work." "It must be," I quietly agreed, looking down at my plate. What law exactly? Catherine persisted. Criminal, I said. Federal criminal law, Judge Reynolds added suddenly, crisply, and clearly. His voice was neutral, but the words resounded like a shot fired in the silence. Victoria waved her hand as if swatting away an annoying fly. Same difference. All this government legal work. You know it, Catherine. Bureaucracy, paperwork, low-level matters. Elena feels comfortable there. She's not up for the big games. The table fell into a moment of icy, ringing silence. My father broke it. He was always a peacemaker, and now his voice sounded with forced ease. The important thing is, he said, addressing everyone, but smiling exclusively at Victoria, that one of our daughters has undoubtedly achieved remarkable success. We are immensely proud of Victoria. Her marriage to Mark, joining such a family, it's a serious, real achievement. Achievement, Judge Reynolds repeated, without intonation, like an echo. Of course, my mother chimed in, nodding happily, like a passenger trying to keep afloat a sinking boat. The Reynolds family is so remarkable. Federal judges, the most important connections. Isn't that what every parent dreams of? I wasn't listening. I was looking only at Judge Reynolds. I saw how, in his eyes, those sharp eyes so knowledgeable about human nature, everything came together to form a single, bleak picture. A picture of my life. A picture of why I, possessing everything they so pettily cherished here, had to hide in the shadows. Realization dawned on his face, and there was no triumph in it, only a deep, heavy sadness. Victoria, however, beamed, absorbing her parents' words like long-awaited nectar. I worked hard, she declared, her voice ringing with false modesty, to be worthy of Mark, to become someone his family can be proud of. And Elena? Caroline Reynolds suddenly asked, quietly, but very clearly. Her gaze, intelligent and insightful, slid over my face. What about Elena? Aren't her parents proud of her? Victoria laughed. The sound was sharp, nervous, dismissive. Elena? She's happy with her life. She's never wanted more. Right, Elena? She turned to me, and in her gaze was the unshakable certainty that I would, as always, meekly agree. Like a dog that's been kicked, and it only wags its tail. Everyone at the table turned to me. The pressure of this silence, this expectation, was physical. I felt its weight on my shoulders. I could end this, right now, with one sentence. Instead, I breathed out, I'm happy. Happy, Victoria echoed triumphantly, as if I'd just confessed some wretchedness of mine. See, Elena knows her limits. Not everyone needs to be successful. Some people are just ordinary, and there's nothing wrong with that. She said this with such sweet, deadly kindness, as if she were doing me a great favor by acknowledging my mediocrity. My father nodded, clinging to this version with relief. We've come to terms with the fact that our daughters are very different. Victoria always aimed for the stars, and Elena, she always aimed realistically, down to earth. Judge Reynolds slowly, clinking his fork onto the edge of his plate. The sound was soft, but in the silence it resounded like a gong. His voice remained polite, but beneath it there was now a cold, tempered steel. Why do you all think, he asked, looking at my parents and Victoria, that Elena isn't successful? The question hung in the air, sharp and awkward. Victoria snorted, nervously adjusting her napkin. Well, it's obvious. She works for the government, drives an old Camry, lives in an apartment. No offense, Elena, she glanced at me quickly. But success looks different to different people. For some, it's a quiet, modest life. No offense, I quietly confirmed, looking at my hands. But Catherine seemed no longer listening to this chatter. She stared at me intently, almost hypnotically. Wait, you said federal criminal law. How long have you been in this field? Quite a while, I replied evasively. And what is your specific position? She repeated insistently, her voice taking on the tone of a cross-examining attorney. Victoria waved her hand in irritation. Catherine, is that so important? Let's discuss the wedding instead. I really need your advice on locations. You know so much about stylish venues. "What is your position, Elena?" Judge Reynolds interrupted. His question sounded less like a request than a polite yet imperative demand. Dead silence reigned at the table again. Even the waiter carrying the tray froze mid-step. At that moment, I looked at Victoria, at her smug, radiant confidence in her own superiority, at my parents, at their embarrassed faces, yet resigned to this hierarchy, at this whole scene where for years I had been a convenient backdrop, living proof of her success. Then I glanced at Judge Reynolds. He looked at me directly, calmly, and subtly so that no one but me could see it. He nodded. It was a nod of understanding, a nod of permission. I cleared my throat. I poured into my voice all the firmness I'd used when delivering the sentence. "I'm a federal judge," I said clearly, enunciating each word, "of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia." The silence that followed was absolute. It seemed even the air stopped moving. Then Victoria laughed, a high, hysterical, utterly disbelieving laugh. "What? Elena, stop it. That's not funny. Not funny at all." "I'm not joking." "You? A judge?" my mother whispered. Her face turned white. "Since when?" 13 years. My father shook his head as if shaking off a vision. "That's impossible. You said you worked in the courtroom. As an assistant, a clerk." "I told you I work in federal criminal law, and that's true. I handle federal criminal cases. As a judge." Victoria's face went from white to scarlet, then white again, now with a greenish tint. "You're lying. You can't be a federal judge. That's—" She searched for words, clinging to scraps of knowledge. "They're appointed by the president." "Confirmed by the Senate," Judge Reynolds said quietly but very clearly. "And they serve for life." "Elena, when were you confirmed?" "March 2011, I replied, looking directly at Victoria. "President Obama. Senate vote? 94-2. The numbers seemed to physically strike her. All the color drained from her face. She looked as if she'd just been pushed into an icy void. And then Catherine, her eyes fixed on me, slowly pulled her phone out of her purse. Her fingers flicked rapidly across the screen. After a few seconds, she turned the phone toward the center of the table. On the screen was a photograph. My photograph. Me in a black judicial robe, speaking at the podium at a national legal conference last year. "Judge Elena Martinez," Catherine read with icy clarity, "United States District Court, Eastern District of Virginia." My God. My mother snatched the phone from her. Her hands were shaking. It's you, in a robe, a real judicial robe." "Yes, Mom, it's me." "But you said you never—" She looked up at Victoria, confused. "You knew?" "Of course I didn't know," Victoria screamed. Her voice rose to a shriek. "She lied. She's been letting us think she's a nobody all these years." "I've never lied," I said calmly, almost wearily. "I told you I work in federal criminal law. That's the absolute truth. You assumed I held a low-level position. I didn't correct you. That's a lie by omission, the most vile kind of lie." "Really?" I leaned forward, finally letting all the composure I'd accumulated over the years drain from my voice. It came out quietly, but with such force that she recoiled. "You called me a secretary. You called my job nothing. You whispered in my ear, 'Just don't embarrass me.' At what point, Victoria, was I supposed to correct you? At which of those thousands of moments of disdain?" Judge Reynolds watched the unfolding drama with that same expression I recognized from the courtroom, the expression of a man watching a witness tear down his defense with his own words. You know each other," Mark said slowly, looking at his father and me. His face was filled with utter confusion. "You know each other. Personally." "Judge Martinez and I have served together on several judicial committees," Judge Reynolds confirmed. His voice was even, but every word was on target. "She's one of the most brilliant, principled, and erudite legal minds I've ever worked with in my entire career." Victoria stood up so abruptly that her chair rolled back with a crash. "This is insane! You're all crazy! Elena isn't a federal judge. She can't be one. I would have known." "Really?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time you asked me about my work, Victoria? Not just told me, but actually asked. When was the last time you were interested in my life at all? Not as a backdrop to yours, but my life." That's not true," she choked. "When?" She waved her hand helplessly and turned to our parents, seeking refuge in them. Tell them that this is all nonsense, that Elena isn't a judge." But my mother wasn't listening anymore. She was frantically scrolling through the search results on Catherine's phone. There are so many articles. Judge Martinez is presiding over a high-profile corruption case. Judge Martinez's opinion has become a precedent. Elena, is this all true? Everything. My father read over her shoulder. His face had turned ashen. You sent a state senator to prison?" "He took bribes. The evidence was overwhelming," I answered simply. "You were a federal judge for 13 years. He exhaled slowly, as if reliving each passing year. 13 years. And you didn't say a word. Not to us, not to your sister. You never asked. You just assumed. And I allowed it." Victoria slammed her palm down on the table. The glassware clinked. "Why?" Her voice rang with rage and humiliation. "Why did you hide this? Do you realize how this makes me look? I told his family," she pointed a finger at the Reynolds family, "that you were nobody, that you were an ordinary gray mouse and I was successful, that one of us made ourselves and the other was content with crumbs." "Yes," I agreed coldly. "You told me, very willingly. You made me look like a complete idiot." "No, Victoria, you did this yourself." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Judge Reynolds delicately cleared his throat. "Perhaps, under the circumstances, we should all take a break." "No!" Victoria's hands were shaking. She was on edge. "No, I want to know. Why, Elena? Why let everyone think you're a loser? What's the fun in that?" I leaned back in my chair and for the first time all evening allowed myself to look at her not as a sister, but as a person on the witness stand whose testimony was falling apart. "The truth?" I asked. "The truth!" she screamed. I looked straight at her. "Because you needed it. You desperately needed me to be exactly like that." "That's nonsense." "The truth?" My voice grew quieter, but that only made it more dangerous. "You've built your entire adult identity on one thing. You're the best. Smarter, more successful, more accomplished than me. What would have happened if you'd known the truth 13 years ago?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I continued for her, quietly, mercilessly. "You would have turned this into an achievement, a competition that you would have won again. You would have told everyone I got the position through connections, influence, or pure luck. Anything to maintain your title as the successful sister. You're doing it right now. Your first reaction isn't surprise, not joy for me. It's rage that your imagined reality has collapsed, leaving you not on a pedestal, but in an awkward position." My mother gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand. My father stared at his plate, as if hoping it would swallow him whole. Mark stared at Victoria with wide eyes. He saw not his elegant, ambitious fiancée, but a stranger whose face was distorted by an unsightly, banal malice. "I think," Judge Reynolds repeated carefully, "a pause is truly necessary. This is certainly a shock to everyone." "Shock?" Victoria choked with indignation. "My sister lied to our entire family for over 10 years, made fools of us in front of you, and you're suggesting we just take a break?" "I didn't make fools of you," I repeated wearily. "I was simply living my life, and you all painted your own convenient picture. You, Victoria, especially. You allowed it. You pretended to be poor. You pretended to be a failure. She suddenly fell silent. Her eyes widened with a new, terrifying realization. "Wait, An apartment. You said you couldn't afford a house." "I never said that," I interrupted. "You assumed it yourself, like everything else." Catherine was still glued to her phone, her fingers frantically flicking across the screen. Her expression was focused, her lips slightly parted in astonishment. "Judge Martinez's financial disclosure statements are publicly available," she read aloud, her voice like a sentence. "She owns real estate, a townhouse in the historic Old Town neighborhood of Alexandria. The assessed value is, my God, $1.8 million. My mother gasped as if she'd been punched in the gut. "And that's not all," Catherine looked up, her eyes blazing with a cold, analytical light. "Federal judges earn a base salary of $223,400 per year, and have done so for the past 13 years. Plus potential investment income, which, judging by the property taxes and the lack of a mortgage, it seems you've managed your money very wisely, Judge Martinez." "You're rich," Victoria managed to say. It wasn't a statement, but an accusation. "I'm well off. I live comfortably," I corrected her, my voice finally taking on the firmness I usually used from the bench. You let me pay for your dinner last Christmas," her voice rose to a shriek. "You sat there and let me think you were barely making ends meet, that you needed my help." "You insisted on it," I reminded her coldly. "You placed your credit card on the tray and said, verbatim, 'Don't worry, Elena, I know you're strapped for cash right now.' And I said, 'Thank you.' That was all." At that moment, the waiter appeared with the main courses on a silver tray. He took 2 steps toward our table, paused, read the apocalyptic atmosphere on our faces, and just as silently, like a ghost, turned and disappeared into the depths of the restaurant. Judge Reynolds leaned back in his chair, folding his hands on the table. His gaze was fixed on me, and there was neither anger nor reproach in it, only a heavy, questioning understanding. "Elena," he said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "I have to ask, why now? Why reveal all this tonight?" I slowly moved my gaze from him to Victoria, at her face distorted with rage and panic. "Because," I said, my words falling like stones into the ringing silence, "I'm tired." "Tired?" she snorted, but a flicker of animal fear flickered in her eyes. "Tired of being your villain, Victoria. Your cautionary tale. A sister you can sympathize with publicly and scorn in private. Living proof that your path is the only true one." "I never—" "You did this all the time," I interrupted, finally letting out what had been building for years. I pulled out my phone. My fingers knew where to click. I opened Instagram, found her profile, and scrolled to a month-old post. I began reading it aloud in a smooth, merciless voice. "So grateful for my unique journey. It's important to remember, some people are content with an ordinary life. I've always chosen the extraordinary. #blessed, #success, #family comes first." "That wasn't about you," she cried, but her cheeks were flushed. "There was a photo of us together underneath the post," I continued, ignoring her. "You in your new Valentino dress, and I'm in the background, next to your old Camry, which you specifically asked me to include in the picture. And you tagged me. You always tag me in these posts." The silence thickened again, oppressive and awkward. "Or this one?" I scrolled further. "Grateful for sisters, even when our paths diverge so much. Some of us aim high." A photo from my father's birthday. You and your husband in the center of the frame, me, alone, blurred in the background. A constant contrast, a constant reminder. I was just sharing my thoughts. "And this is the text you sent me last week." I switched to the messenger, finding the conversation. My voice turned icy. "Make sure you look presentable for dinner. Mark's family is used to a certain standard. I know this isn't your world, but please try not to lose face." I set the phone down on the tablecloth. The sound was soft, but final. 13 years, Victoria. For 13 years, I allowed you to treat me like something less, like someone to be ashamed of. I allowed it because in some twisted logic, I thought it made you happier, that if you could feel superior to me, your life would have meaning. "I'm already happy," she blurted out, but there wasn't a drop of happiness in her eyes, only panic. "Really?" I looked at her, and for the first time my gaze held not pity, but genuine, bitter compassion for her. "You've had 3 marriages. You've changed careers like gloves, marketing, events, now charity. You've reinvented yourself again and again, chasing the ghost of what you call success. And each time you measured that success by me. At least I'm not like Elena. That was your mantra." My mother began to cry, quietly, hopelessly, covering her face with a napkin. My father looked like he was about to vomit. He was gray and blurry, like his own shadow. Mark didn't say a word. He simply stared at Victoria, his gaze blank, as if he were looking at a stranger whose mask had just been ripped off. "It's unfair," Victoria whispered, and for the first time, a childish, helpless resentment crept into her voice. "You lied. You made us all look like fools." "No," Judge Reynolds said firmly and mercilessly. His authoritative voice cut through the air like a knife. "Elena lived her life, a private, dignified life in public service. You, her family, made a series of self-serving assumptions and never bothered to verify them. There's a gulf between lying and silently accepting someone else's error." Victoria desperately rushed toward him as if he were the last judge. "But you understand, right? You must understand why I'm so upset. Your son is marrying into a family that has lived a lie for years." "My son," Judge Reynolds interrupted, his voice as cold as steel in the polar night, "is marrying into a family where one daughter served her country for 13 years on the federal bench with such dignity and professionalism that she is spoken of with respect in every courtroom in this country. He's marrying into a family where one daughter sent corrupt officials to prison, rendered decisions cited by appellate courts, and earned a reputation for impeccable integrity." He paused, letting each word sink in. "And where the other daughter, by all appearances, has spent all these years humiliating the first. So no, Victoria, I don't understand. Not at all." Victoria's face twisted into a snarl of rage, shame, and horror. Caroline Reynolds spoke for the first time in minutes. Her voice was soft but insightful. "Elena, forgive me for asking so bluntly, but why today? What made you break this wall of silence tonight?" I looked at my sister again, not as a rival, but as a phenomenon I'd finally decided to call by its own name. Because I've realized one simple thing. No matter how much I diminish myself, no matter how much I hide my accomplishments, Victoria will always need someone to feel superior to, someone to consider a failure. And I'm done being that person. "I never asked you to be him," Victoria cried, but her voice trembled. "You didn't have to ask. You demanded it. Every conversation we had, every family gathering, every sigh thrown my way was that demand. Don't embarrass me. Don't talk about work. Don't remind them you exist." As if my mere existence was something shameful, something to hide. "It's not." "It is." I pushed back my chair. The sound of it scraping across the floor resounded loudly, like a gunshot. I stood up. My legs were steady. My knees didn't tremble. "For 13 years, I watched you build your identity on the ruins of my reputation. How you introduced me to your friends, to your husbands, to those familiar with that sweet, apologetic smile. And this is my little sister. She's not as ambitious as I am." And I smiled. I nodded. I accepted this role. I looked at Judge Reynolds, and I must have read apology in my eyes. "But I can't do this anymore. Not when you're joining a family that includes a man I respect perhaps more than any other colleague. A man who embodies for me everything it means to serve justice with honor. I won't allow the caricature you've drawn to be the truth Mark's family knows." "You're doing this out of revenge," Victoria breathed. Tears of rage laced her voice. "Out of petty, pathetic revenge." "No," I said quietly. "I'm doing this out of self-respect, because I deserve more, because I've earned more." I picked up my bag. The skin was cool and familiar beneath my fingers. "Judge Reynolds, Caroline, Catherine, my deepest apologies. I know this isn't the evening you were hoping for." "Don't apologize," Judge Reynolds replied immediately and firmly. "There's nothing to apologize for. To anyone." "Elena, wait," my father said hoarsely, extending his hand to me, but not standing. "We can discuss everything." "No, Dad." My voice wavered, but I didn't let it break. "I'm done waiting. I'm done being silent. I'm done making myself small, unnoticeable, insignificant, just so Victoria can feel huge and important." I turned to my sister one last time. "I sincerely hope you find what you're looking for. I hope Mark brings you the happiness you seem so desperately seeking. I wish you a good, strong life together." I paused. "But I will no longer be part of a family where the condition of my participation is pretense, pretending to be someone I'm not." "You're just leaving," my mother whispered, looking at me with eyes full of confusion and horror. "Just like that." "Yes," I agreed. "Just like that." And then Catherine suddenly stood up. Her movement was sharp and decisive. "Elena, wait. Judge Martinez, may I walk you to the parking lot?" I nodded, unable to speak. In the parking lot, in the cool evening air that smelled of rain and freedom, Catherine leaned against the fender of my old Camry. A strange, almost admiring smile touched her lips. "So, a federal judge," she said, shaking her head. "Oh, my God." "So, a partner at a venture capital firm," I countered with a weak smile. $400 million under management." She laughed, shortly, genuinely. "Your sister. She spent months telling me about her family, about how successful she is, and how you are, well, you know, simple, modest, contented with little. She so wanted us all to see that contrast." "I know." "I Googled you," Catherine admitted, staring off into the darkness. 2 weeks ago. I found your criminal record. I recognized your name right away. I went to Columbia Law School before going into finance. I read a few of your opinions back in my sophomore year. I knew who you were. And I waited. Waited to see if you'd say anything yourself. I wanted to understand, whether you're hiding or whether your family is simply blind." "Perhaps both," I sighed. "Honestly?" Catherine turned to me, and there wasn't a shred of falsehood or pretense in her eyes. "I think you're incredible. And I think my brother just realized with startling clarity that he might be marrying the wrong sister." I couldn't help but smile, weakly, wearily. He loves her. He'll figure it out. Or not. It's his path. "Perhaps, but Elena," she paused, choosing her words, "don't disappear, please. My father, he respects you deeply. This isn't just politeness. My mother, while you were all sorting things out, she read the 3 reports I sent her. She's absolutely delighted. We're not your family, but we see you. Do you understand?" Something heavy and prickly that had been lodged in my chest for years suddenly wavered and weakened. It didn't crumble, no, but it cracked, and a warm, living light shone through. "Thank you, Catherine," I whispered, my voice hoarse with pent-up emotion. She nodded, lightly touched my shoulder, a gesture of support, brotherly, without unnecessary sentimentality, and turned to return to the hell that remained in the illuminated restaurant. I got into my old faithful Camry, started the engine, and off I went. Home. To my sad little apartment. My real home. A 3-story historic townhouse in Old Town, with tall windows, stucco ceilings, and a quiet, cozy garden behind a wrought iron fence. I turned on the light in the living room, and a soft glow filled the familiar, cherished space. It smelled of old books, parquet wax, and tranquility. I kicked off my shoes and texted Michael a short message. Family dinner was interesting. I'll tell you tomorrow. Everything's fine. He called almost immediately. His voice, low and calm, was the best balm. Interesting in a good way, or interesting in the kind of way that makes you want to drink a whole bottle of wine alone? Interesting. Necessary, I said, pressing the phone to my ear and looking out the dark window where the lights of Alexandria flickered. You told them, he stated, not asked. I told them. How are you feeling, darling? I thought. I reviewed the flashes of anger, the shock, the tears, the icy silence, and discovered something surprisingly light beneath it all. Free, I finally exhaled. I feel free. The first message arrived around 11, then another, and another. The phone screen lit up in the darkness of the bedroom like a beacon of distress. Victoria, I can't believe you did this. You ruined everything. Victoria, Mark's parents now think I'm a terrible person. How could you? Victoria, this is the most shameful evening of my life, and you caused it. I didn't answer. Let her talk to the ghost she created herself, that pathetic, hapless Victoria. Then a message came from my mother. Elena, we need to talk. Your father is very upset. This isn't how we behave in a family. I turned off the phone. Just turned it off. And for the first time in years, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I turned it back on. 17 missed calls. Voicemails poured into the silence of the kitchen. My father's voice, choked with anger and humiliation. Elena, that was completely inappropriate. You made a fool of not only your sister, but all of us. Your mother didn't sleep all night. You need to call Victoria immediately and apologize, and explain yourself. My mother's voice, blurred by tears. I just don't understand. Why? Why did you have to hide all this? We could have been so proud of you. We would have bragged about you to everyone. Why did you take that away from us? And Victoria. Her messages were a hysterical monologue. Mark says he needs time to think. His parents hinted that they should weigh the circumstances. Do you understand? You ruined my life. You destroyed everything I worked for. I hope you're happy now, Judge. I hope your brilliant career is worth my happiness. And amid this stream of self-justifications and accusations, one unexpected message. Elena, this is Catherine Reynolds. I understand that right now the last thing you probably want is to hear from anyone in our family. But I wanted you to know, my parents aren't doubting Mark and Victoria because of you. They're doubting them because of the way Victoria acted towards you. That's important. Besides, Dad's asking if you're free for lunch next week. Businesslike. They're forming an inter-district task force on procedural code reform, and he's insisting on your participation. Call me when you can. I sipped my coffee, took a deep breath, and called Catherine back. Hello, she answered immediately, her voice calm and businesslike. How are you? Coming to my senses, are you having a storm? We had a very long family breakfast, Catherine said. Mark's asking a lot of questions. Questions he now realizes he should have asked earlier. Like what? For example, why does Victoria speak so harshly of people she considers beneath her? Waiters, drivers, assistants. Why is her scale of a person's worth so rigidly tied to their position and bank balance? Catherine paused. She spent this morning trying to convince Mark that you're a brilliant manipulator who's been plotting this cunning plan for decades, only to humiliate her at the crucial moment. And Mark asked her one simple question. Why did she spend all these years telling him her sister was a loser without ever asking what she really did? She didn't have a good answer. I suddenly felt sorry for Mark. He wasn't the villain in this story, but a blind man who'd suddenly received his sight back, and the first thing he saw wasn't the beautiful view he'd been promised. It's not his fault, I said. No, but it's his problem now. Elena, can I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. Why are you still driving that old Camry? I laughed, genuinely. Because it never lets me down. Because I just need a way to get from point A to point B. And a car is a status symbol? That seems ridiculous to me. And the townhouse? You don't advertise it. I'm not hiding it. It's just not on public display. I'm a federal judge, Catherine. My home address is confidential for security reasons. My life is private because it's a professional necessity, not a choice. That's what I thought. But Victoria kept telling Mark all morning that you're ashamed of your place, that you don't live modestly because you have a good life. Victoria believes what suits her, I said, and there was no longer any anger or resentment in my voice, just a tired statement of fact. Unfortunately, yes, Catherine sighed. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if the wedding will happen. Mark, he loves her, that's true, but he also now sees someone he didn't notice before. And the woman who spent months mocking her own sister, a federal judge, isn't quite the image he had in mind when he proposed. He proposed to her specifically, I said quietly. He just didn't see her fully. Exactly. She paused. And you? Are you planning on making peace with your family? I don't know. Now they're angry not because they didn't see me, but because I made them realize it. That makes a big difference. Another pause, but this time warmer. Dad really wants you to have lunch with him. He's been calling all our mutual friends in the legal community since this morning, and he seems to be talking with undisguised delight about the brilliant Judge Martinez, who outsmarted us all in modesty. You've made a powerful fan, Elena. The corners of my lips twitched. Tell him I'd be flattered. After our conversation, I went out into my small garden with a cup of coffee. The sun warmed my back. I thought about Victoria, about my parents, about those 13 years when I was transparent to them. And for the first time, this thought didn't cause pain. It evoked only a quiet, sad detachment. The phone rang again. This time, it was Judge Reynolds. Elena, I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, Your Honor. I wanted to apologize in person for last night. It was a painful and unsightly performance, and I feel my share of the blame. Your Honor, you have absolutely nothing to apologize for. No? A hint of bitterness entered his voice. I should have intervened immediately. I should have introduced you properly, as a colleague, but I let the situation reach a boiling point where I could have stopped it. With respect, sir, she needed to boil over, I said firmly. They all needed to hear it from me, and see it with their own eyes. He paused, and in the silence, I heard his soft sigh. Catherine said you agreed to lunch. Yes. Excellent. But, Elena, I'm calling now not only as your colleague, I'm calling as Mark's father. His voice grew more serious. My son loves your sister. He sincerely wanted to start a family with her. But now he's faced with the fact that the woman he's in love with has been cruelly and systematically humiliating a man I deeply respect for years. He doesn't know what to do about it. I don't want to come between them, I said quickly. It's their relationship. You're not coming between them. Victoria's own choices are coming between them, and that makes a huge difference. He sighed, and the sound was weary, paternal. Mark asked me this morning if Victoria could change. Can a woman who despised her own sister for 13 years become different? And what did you say? I replied that it wasn't for me to judge. But I also said that anyone who needed to trample a federal judge for 13 years to gain self-respect should ask themselves some very serious questions about their own soul. She's not angry, Your Honor. She's wounded, insecure. She's always needed to compete. Cruel, he corrected softly but relentlessly. Elena, I understand your desire to vindicate her, but what I saw yesterday wasn't a flash of anger. It was the culmination of a long-established, well-oiled system. Your parents, without meaning to, confirmed this. Every story they told about you was tinged with condescension. Every comparison favored her. Such a family climate doesn't happen by accident. No, I quietly agreed. It doesn't. Mark must decide whether he can tie his life to a man who needs others to be small to feel significant. And that burden is not yours. Remember that. Thank you, Your Honor. Call me Tom. Given our collegial relationship, it's more than appropriate. And Elena, he paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with warm, genuine pride. I'm proud to call you my colleague. What you've achieved and the dignity with which you've endured it all, you're a credit to our profession. When we finished talking, I couldn't hold back. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Not from grief, from that immense, liberating feeling of finally being seen, not as someone else, but as you, all of you, and accepted. 3 weeks later, I was in my judge's office, immersed in a complex motion, when there was a knock. My clerk poked his head out. Judge Martinez, waiting in the waiting room for you is... Victoria Martinez. She says she's your sister. She doesn't have an appointment." I put my pen down. My heart skipped a beat, then began to beat steadily and heavily. "Show her in." Victoria walked in. She looked broken. Her eyes were puffy and red without her usual makeup. She was wearing plain jeans and a worn-out sweatshirt with the Georgetown logo, the same one she wore in college. I'd never seen her wear anything so plain in public. "Elena," she said. Her voice was hoarse without its usual sweetness. "Victoria, sit down." She sat down in the visitor's chair, and her platoon glided around the office. The walls lined with law books and worn bindings, the diplomas in stern frames, the photograph on the table where I had been with a group of judges, including Thomas Reynolds, at an official conference. She looked as if she were seeing it all for the first time. And perhaps she was. Is this really your office?" she asked finally, and there was something childish, lost in her voice. "Yes." She slowly shook her head, her gaze lingering on my black judicial robe hanging on the coat rack by the door. "And are you really a federal judge?" It was no longer a shout of accusation, but a quiet, almost timid question. I looked her straight in the eyes, into those same eyes that had looked down at me for so many years. "Yes, Victoria, it's true." She was silent for a long moment, her breathing ragged. Then she exhaled words that seemed to burn her lips. "Mark broke off our engagement this morning." "I'm sorry," I said, and it was the honest truth. There was no joy in her pain for me. "Yes?" She looked up at me, a storm raging in her eyes. Hurt, rage, despair. "You got what you wanted, didn't you? You humiliated me. You ruined my relationship. You made me look like a monster in front of the people whose opinions meant everything to me." "Is that what you think I wanted?" I asked calmly. "Isn't it?" Her voice broke into a scream, echoing in the quiet room. I leaned back in my judge's chair, feeling its firm, reliable support. "Victoria, I spent 13 years of my life making myself invisible so you could shine, making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. If my goal had been to humiliate you, believe me, I would have had countless opportunities to do it gracefully and completely, years ago. Then why now?" It was no longer a scream, but a groan. "Why all this now?" "Because you are about to enter a family that includes a man I respect more than most. Because I couldn't stand next to you under the chuppah, smiling and pretending to be living proof of your success compared to my mediocre self." I paused, choosing the most important words. "And because I'm finally tired of lying to myself about what our relationship was really like all these years." "What?" she whispered, and her voice suddenly took on a genuine, unfeigned vulnerability. "One-sided, built on a single foundation, your need to see me always and in everything as inferior to you. That was the foundation on which you built your world." She winced as if struck. "It's unfair." "Really?" My question hung in the air. "When was the last time you asked me, honestly, without prejudice, about my life, and listened to the answer? Not to turn the conversation back on yourself, but simply to hear. When was the last time you celebrated something I accomplished, not as an excuse to throw your own party, but simply to be happy for me? When was the last conversation we had where you didn't compare us, didn't find me inadequate, didn't emphasize your superiority?" The silence in the office grew thick, almost palpable. "I can't remember either," I finished quietly. "I didn't mean to," she began, and trailed off, gulping for air. Then she tried again. "Mark said I was cruel, that I treated you like you were worthless. I didn't think I was that bad." "You didn't think you were bad at all, Victoria. You thought you were honest, realistic, that you were the successful sister who, sadly but factually, acknowledged her unlucky sister's situation. Your self-image was built on that. You didn't see the cruelty. You saw the truth." "But you were never a loser," she breathed, and it sounded like a revelation spoken aloud for the first time. "You were Extraordinary. All this time, and I was too self-absorbed to see it. "Yes," I said simply. She looked up at me. She truly looked at me, as if for the first time in 20 years. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if this can be fixed at all." You want me to try?" A tiny, fragile hope rang in her voice. I thought, not about the past, but about the future, about what it could be. "I want you to first figure out who you are without me as your eternal antithesis, without the need for someone worse by your side, against whom you can feel better. Until you do this work within yourself, there will be nothing to fix between us." Mark, he said almost the same thing, that he can't build a life with someone whose self-esteem is fueled by the humiliation of others. He's a wise man. I love him, Elena. I know, but love alone isn't enough, Victoria. It's not enough if you can't see your partner clearly, in all their light, without obscuring them with your own light. If you need them to be your foil, not the protagonist of your own life. She nodded slowly, as if accepting a difficult but inevitable truth. Mom and Dad, they're furious with me. They say it was me who pushed you away, that it was me who destroyed the family. You didn't destroy anything. You merely uncovered what had long since been destroyed. You revealed what was already there. She hesitated. Will you come with me? To therapy? Family therapy. Mom wants to organize it. She thinks if we all sit down and talk to a psychologist... No. My voice sounded firmer than I'd intended. No, Victoria, not now. First, you need your own individual therapy. You need to figure out, alone with a professional, why your identity is so entwined with the idea of superiority over me, why you need other people's failures to feel like you're succeeding. Until you begin this difficult internal work, any family therapy will be just another performance, another arena for comparison. It's cruel, she whispered. It's fair. I've been quiet for 13 years. I kept quiet and allowed it. Now I'm done being silent. She stood up. Her movements were slow, as if each one was an enormous effort. I really did ruin everything, didn't I? You laid it all bare. There's a difference. At the door, she turned around. I know you probably won't believe it, but I'm proud of you, truly. A federal judge, 13 years. It's incredible. Thank you, I said, and there was neither sarcasm nor arrogance in the word. I wish I could have seen this sooner. I know. After she left, I sat in my chair for a long time, staring at the door as she closed it behind her. I felt neither triumphant satisfaction nor the old acrid anger. There was only a quiet, deep sense of closure, as if the final page of a thick, painful chapter had finally been turned. The phone on the table vibrated. Michael. Dinner tonight? You've been so quiet lately. I smiled, for the first time that day, a small, genuine smile, and typed, yes, and I have a whole saga for you. That evening, over a glass of red wine in my cozy townhouse living room, I told him everything, from the beginning to today's visit. So your family, they really had no idea. For 13 years? Not the slightest. 13 years, he shook his head, his eyes filled with both admiration and deep sadness. It's both impressive and incredibly sad. I know. And how are you? Really? I paused, listening to myself. I think I'm okay. It feels strange. It's like I've been carrying something so heavy on my shoulders for so long that my muscles have gone numb, and I've forgotten what it feels like to move freely. And now I've shed that burden. It feels both lighter and unfamiliar. What now? Now I live my life without apologizing for my success and without diminishing myself to make it easier for others. A good plan, he said, his eyes smiling warmly. He raised his glass to Judge Elena Martinez, who has finally stopped hiding in the shadows. I corrected him, touching my glass to his with a soft clink. to being seen. 3 months later, Judge Reynolds, Tom, and I completed a joint article on federal justice reform. It was published in the Harvard Law Review. It was serious, weighty work. My parents saw it on Facebook. Someone from their country club, a lawyer, shared the link with the comment, "Did you know that David and Marie Martinez's daughter is not only a federal judge, but also published in the Harvard Law Review? Bravo!" My mom called me, her voice shaking with excitement. "Elena, we saw the article. Dad wants to host a dinner at the club. Invite everyone to celebrate." "Celebrate what, Mom?" I asked calmly. "The article? Or the fact that people in your circle finally know what their daughter has been doing for the last 13 years? A heavy, thick silence hung over the line. "Mom, I love you. But until you can tell me you're proud of me, for my work, for my principles, for who I am, and not because the country club now knows, I guess we have nothing to talk about." That's cruel, Elena." "That's honest. I'll talk to you when you're ready to be honest, too." I hung up. My heart sank, but it didn't break. It simply confirmed what I already knew. 6 months after that ill-fated engagement dinner, I received an elegant wedding invitation on heavy paper. Not from Victoria. She and Mark had finally separated. Catherine, with whom I now corresponded periodically, said that Victoria was indeed seeing a therapist and, in her words, dealing with her demons. The invitation was from Catherine. She was marrying her longtime partner, a brilliant neuroscientist, in a small but elegant ceremony on Nantucket. "I know it's nerve to invite you after everything that's happened," she handwritten on a small card tucked into the envelope, "but you're the type of person I want in my circle, someone who knows who they are and doesn't apologize for it. Besides, Dad's threatening to corner you over this new legal initiative. I'm warning you." I went. I congratulated a beaming Catherine, met her fiancé, spent hours chatting with Tom Reynolds about the intricacies of judicial ethics, and later, at the reception, I even allowed myself to relax and dance. Before I left, Tom pulled me aside under the shade of an old maple tree. "Mark sometimes asks about you, asks how you're doing. Tell him I'm fine, very fine. He feels guilty for not seeing the situation with Victoria sooner. He shouldn't. We all only see what we're ready for. He saw it when he was ready." "Wise," he nodded. Then he paused. "Elena, I'm truly glad you've come out of the shadows. Our legal community has only benefited from seeing you in full view." "Thank you, Tom. And, by the way, I think your family, they'll cope. Some people just need time to refocus." "Perhaps, but I'm not going to wait for them to do so any longer." And rightly so. Don't wait. I drove home. To my townhouse, which was no longer a secret. To my life, which was no longer a quiet refuge, but had become an honest, open space. I thought about Victoria, about my parents, about 13 years of living as a ghost. I remembered Tom saying, "Your Honor," the look on Victoria's face, the sound of breaking crystal. And I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd proven anything. I felt free, truly, deeply, free to the bone. My phone vibrated in the car, a message from an unfamiliar number. "This is Mark Reynolds. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from Catherine. I wanted to say thank you for showing me what I needed to see, even if the price for that vision was high. I hope you're doing well." I looked at the text, at the dark road ahead, and smiled. I typed a reply. "I'm really doing well. Thank you for asking. I hope you find someone you can see clearly and who can see you clearly. That changes everything." A minute later, the reply came, "I hope so. And I hope Victoria finds that clear vision too. She's trying. That's something." "Yes," I sent the last message. "That's a lot." I placed the phone on the passenger seat. The car windows were rolled down, and the night air, filled with the scent of approaching autumn, blew in. I drove along the familiar road toward the home that was mine, to the life that was mine, to a success that was well-deserved. I stopped hiding. And it turned out that being seen was worth every sacrifice I made to remain invisible. It was worth all that silence, because there was no life in silence. But in the truth, no matter how bitter and difficult it was, there was.